When I was a much younger Sunny Jim, there were a select few games that gave me legitimate nightmares, like waking up in the middle of the night screaming my head off nightmares. Now I can say resoundingly that two of those games were the original Silent Hill and Doom, but there was a fantastic little Half-Life mod named They Hunger, which also gave me more than a few sleepless nights. They Hunger is arguably one of the scariest single-player mods ever made for Half-Life, and every kid who happened to play it back in the day would have metaphorically shit themselves when playing it at one point or another. It somehow managed to capture this really dark, eerie setting, despite how basic it was graphically, and the way zombies moaned as they stalked you made for a fantastic and creepy experience. With the release of Half-Life 2, it was eventually announced that the original development team was working on a sequel named They Hunger Lost Souls, running on the new and improved Source engine. And all things considered, it looked like a worthy successor. But time passed, little seemed to happen, and it seemed less and less likely that the sequel would ever see the light of day. And eventually they announced it was cancelled. Fast forward now to 2016, and the series has had new life to breathe into it with They Hunger Again, a Source engine-based so-called remake of the original mod, available for download from ModDB in its largely unfinished state. And if you're anything like me, when you first heard about this mod, your heart skipped a beat and you looked forward to having the bejesus scared out of you all over again. Well folks, it pains me to say this, but They Hunger Again isn't likely to invoke some kind of nostalgic terror. In fact, most likely just bitter disappointment as you see how much the original mod has been bastardized and ruined. To put it simply and eloquently, this mod fucking sucks, but I think it's important to point out that it is largely unfinished as well. I am willing to overlook a lot of the issues I have with certain things, though if this is meant to entice people into playing it or garner some kind of following, well, they're not doing a very good job at it. A lot of the assets are either recycled from Half-Life 2, like seeing zombies in City 17 jumpsuits for instance, or reskinned to the absolute bare minimum. The lighting and architecture is basic at best and the controls are utterly woeful. But look, let's not rip the mod a new asshole just yet and talk about the things it does right. So from the get-go, things start off well enough, recreating the same intro sequence as you see your character driving through the countryside before his car careens off the road and into a river. The voice acting is utterly horrid, but then again it also was in the original mod, which added a lot to its charm. Once the game starts, you'll venture on a bit until you find a nearby church where you soon acquire a crowbar. I'm assuming they'll model in the umbrella later on. And a nearby radio creepily informs you of strange occurrences, at which point you're attacked by zombies and all hell breaks loose. The next few areas vaguely follow the events in the first episode of the mod, though it does jump around a fair bit and kind of do its own thing, really negating this whole remake thing entirely. But I don't really have an issue with the mod taking its own liberties with the level design. I do have an issue with how gosh darn awful it has gone about doing this. For starters, get a look at how stupidly big the weapon Crosshair is. In a shooting game, a game about shooting zombies of all things, to have a crosshair so big really removes any semblance of accuracy or precision with the shooting. Now this might make sense with a weapon like the shotgun and its spread, but it shouldn't apply to the pistol and machine gun. And it makes getting headshots unfairly tricky. I don't know if you guys know all that much about zombies, but I thought it's a not so well kept secret that any kind of trauma to the head will pretty much do a zombie in. With They Hunger Again, this is a real detriment to firing weapons because you don't really have that much of an idea where each shot is actually going to go. When in combat against the other human enemies, it's even more wild and unpredictable. Now don't give me any bullshit about my character not being a Navy SEAL or something like that either. In the original mod, there was a crosshair that worked as it should have. The crosshair in the remake just feels like an unfair way to handicap the player. The level design itself, which doesn't look all that bad and does a good enough job of updating the environments, can also make basic navigation really tricky at times, as most areas are often very narrow and you'll probably get stuck on props like rocks and planks of wood. I had similar issues like this in Half-Life 2, and it's the downside to a game engine applying physics to literally every single prop in the game world. And then on top of this, the loading times are also atrocious, horrendous even. Yes, horrendous. This seems to fluctuate a fair bit in all honesty, but there were some sections that literally took over a minute to load. Now this isn't acceptable when you think about it, because the maps aren't all that large to begin with, and this is almost a 15-year-old graphics engine. There's other issues as well with the scripting of the game, like the section where you're commandeering a steam train, which is another highlight of the original mod, and yet in the remake the train is broken, as in literally broken. It's supposed to follow the rails presumably as you're moving through a long tunnel full of zombies, but it frequently stops dead in its tracks, no pun intended, when the line curves, or just by other zombies that can bring it to a grinding halt. There's not really all that much else to say because the whole thing lasts less than an hour, and as I said before, I'm willing to give this mod a break because it's still in development. I do plan to take a look at it again when it's finally finished, but in its current state, there's very little here to be excited about. It kind of got me thinking though. I mean, I don't really consider the original Day Hunger mod to be any kind of masterpiece. In fact, the last chapter is a little bit hokey. But there was just something that resonated with people who played it at the time, which made it linger in our minds long after we stopped playing. I just really think there's something so frightening about low polygonal monsters because it's like your imagination has to fill in the blanks, and it's why games like System Shock 2, Thief the Dark Project, and the old Resident Evil and Silent Hill games are always going to be scarier to me than something like Dead Space with its over-the-top monster designs. And Day Hunger again has a really good opportunity here to cash in on that as well, but it just needs a lot of work done, and I really mean a lot of work. If the original mod is Night of the Living Dead, well, Day Hunger again is the 90s remake as if it was directed by Uwe Boll. Hopefully in like 12 or so months they'll have something more impressive to show off, but right now there's very little reason to check this mod out, and sticking with the original is a far more rewarding experience. And if you've never played the original mod, well, hopefully this video propels you to do so.
You've just committed suicide, boy.
Fresh meat.